हेलो यूट्यूब के मतलब खान और आप देख रहे हैं दर्शी गेमर। तो मैं वीडियो देख रहे हैं। इस वीडियो का नाम है स्पेक्टर डिवाइड प्रीव्यू अ ब्रीथ ऑफ फ्रेश एयर फॉर टैक्टिकल शूटर्स। ओके तो स्टार्ट करते हैं इस वीडियो को।
When I
ओए
booted up Spectre Divide for the first time, I fully expected to play yet another team-based competitive shooter that would probably be fine, but likely wouldn't elevate above that. After all, the teaser trailer provided no other information other than Spectre being a mashup of Valorant and CSGO. But
सही
I am so glad to be wrong and to be incredibly overwhelmed by the novelty Spectre Divide brings.
स्पेक्टर डिवाइड ऑफ प्रीव्यू।
The first thing that stood out to me was the art style. Cell shading in FPS games is definitely not something you see every day, and some may argue it could be distracting, but the shadowing and details you can see in the world are actually very clean and bright, so you don't get overwhelmed. I will say the only downside to the visuals was the fact that sometimes the orange outlines on your enemies were too slight and you'd be unable to determine if who you were looking at is, in fact, your enemy. But the fun I had in matches greatly outweighed that visual hiccup, one that I'm sure can be addressed before launch.
सिंग डबल।
But let's back up. Spectre Divide is a 3v3 tactical shooter that utilizes a mechanic called duality, where you control two characters in matches. Technically, these two characters are both you, just split into two bodies. To further solidify the point that these are your two bodies, you're actually able to fully customize both yourself and your Spectre in the menu. It's a really interesting system in a genre that has Valorant or Overwatch, where you can traditionally have these set characters with set abilities that you recognize. Instead, you have yourself and your split body that you're able to really make your own. But Spectre Divide not only encourages you to be creative with your character customization, but also your gameplay too.
सेकंड
You're equipped with a puck that allows you to relocate your Spectre to any position, and then swap to that body. So this can be used to get up to higher points, quickly reposition through a gate, or even live to see another day.
Splinter away!
Your Spectre can also alert you to any enemies approaching that specific body. If I left my Spectre on point B and I had been guarding point A, I'd be alerted if any enemies were nearing point B based on where my Spectre is. This allows your
Spectre
Spectre to
warning.
be even more of a useful tool in each match. If your Spectre dies, you're still able to use your remaining body to see the game through. So the Spectre gives you a second chance if you're smart with placement. When I ran through my first few rounds of a match, I was surprised that learning to manage a second body was not as difficult or daunting as I expected during the tutorial.
ओए होए
It takes a solid minute to figure out how to position yourself and your Spectre and how to best utilize your two bodies in a fight. But the learning curve was actually incredibly shallow. I got about 4 hours of gameplay in, and during that time, I did learn a few tricks to really boost my Spectre mechanics, but learning the basics and getting the reflexes down for managing your Spectre was pretty quick. While Spectres themselves don't have any unique abilities, you're given options for different sets of tech with sponsors. Sponsors provide you and your Spectre with equipment that benefits your team with different abilities and gear. Think of the sponsors as your different classes in an FPS. There are currently 8 sponsors available with different kits that vary from assault-based abilities to healing support abilities. Each set of sponsors are created with duality in mind, so you're able to further utilize your Spectre while activating your abilities. For example, when I used the Pinnacle sponsor, using the Adrenalink stim would heal the body I was currently in. But if I swapped to my Spectre, I'd be able to gain enhanced movement and vision for the duration of the stim.
Adrenalink activated.
This really encourages unique gameplay from players, and during my hands-on time, it kept me on my toes throughout each round. Trying to strategize the best ways to flank enemies or utilize my Spectre for intel was half the fun. I honestly found myself immediately taken by this concept, and after each match, I'd want to queue back in and try a different strategy. The actual matches themselves are pretty self-explanatory. You're tasked with either defending or assaulting different bomb sites, and the first to 8 wins takes the victory. There's a buy period in the first few minutes of each round where you determine what weapons and abilities you want to equip. Unlike Valorant or CSGO, when you buy weapons, you don't just buy individual weapons for each character. The weapons come in sets of 2 that split between you and your Spectre. So when I bought the first weapon set in Tier 2, I received the Buzzsaw for myself and the Harp Sniper for my Spectre. If either you or your Spectre dies but one of you survives the round, you are able to simply buy back the single weapon you're missing in the kit for a discounted price. On that note, the weapons in Spectre Divide aren't particularly unique. They're weapons I've seen before in most FPS rosters, with your typical burst rifles, SMGs, assault rifles, and super-powered operator sniper rifle. But it's the way the weapons work that was the more creative angle. Usually, in tactical shooters, your aim becomes less accurate as you move, and you're encouraged to walk slowly or even crouch when pulling the trigger. It's quite the opposite in Spectre Divide. As long as you're ADSing, you're able to shoot on the move with crosshair accuracy.
Fast recall Hyperdome here.
You can still hipfire, but the best way to ensure your accuracy is maxed is by ADSing a majority of the time. Considering that developer Mountaintop Studios is comprised of developers from Valorant, Apex Legends, Destiny, and other FPS projects, these elements all make sense for Spectre Divide's base mechanics. A lot of casual players feel isolated from the fact that you're not able to move at your max speed and accurately shoot in tactical shooters. But now you're able to move around however you want and maintain that accuracy. The competitive nature of Spectre Divide works without the added need to be strategic in your stuttered movement because of the required management of you and your Spectre. Mountaintop's ability to balance these mechanics is genuinely intelligent. The barrier to entry is a non-issue, with the concept of duality being easily comprehended. However, the skill gap between comprehension and mastering duality is deep enough that players can spend hours and hours in the game and still find new ways to utilize this mechanic in unique ways each match. For the first time in a really long time, I'm so very excited for an all-new competitive FPS. Spectre Divide will be free to play with Spectre and weapon cosmetics as the only purchasables and no pay-to-win mechanics. For more news on Spectre Divide, be sure to stay right here at IGN.
अच्छी वीडियो है यार, काफ़ी इसमें इंफॉर्मेशन थी गेम के बारे में। सो ये वीडियो जो है आईजीएन की भी है प्लस, तो सब्सक्राइब करें मेरा चैनल द अर्सी गेमर। बाय।